Time to talk a little NBA. Erik from eTop21 Sports is here with me, Gino Bapola, for our weekly check-in on everything happening in the world of basketball. So, Erik, now we keep getting closer and closer to the playoffs. Next week, you and I will take a little bit of a break from the NBA because we'll focus in on the brackets. They'll be coming out this Sunday. So early next week, some point, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, you and I will record for the brackets, and that'll be our week of basketball talk next week. But this week, we'll talk about the NBA, and like we've been doing, going to run through the standings and give a little point or two on some of the teams and some of the news and notes over the last week. So for Boston, towards the top of the East, probably going to be a pretty boring last month for them, I'd imagine, because where they are now, like 9.5 games up. This week, we saw in the last week, they lost a couple of games, one when they were up big against the Cavs, and they lost both games this year now to Denver. So they're probably a little frustrated about that, probably leaves a bad taste in their mouth because a lot of people thought that could be a real finals matchup, Boston versus Denver. But they had a weird game their night where they were up 17 to the Jazz. They blew the lead, and then they go on a 20-0 run. For them, I just think right now where they are, they have to just rest Porzingis and Horford, those types of players, probably Holiday too, because you need those guys healthy for your playoff series run. You can't have any of them get banged up over the last 3 weeks to a month in some of these games that really don't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, they rebounded nicely. They're 3-0 after that loss to the Nuggets, but then again, the only playoff team they had was the playoff win that they played. The only team they played in that time that's in the contention for the playoffs was Suns with no Booker. My biggest thing with them is, will their lack of competition and performance under pressure cost them when they are deep in the series?
Yeah,
I'm a little worried about them because we need to remember, as much as everyone wants to anoint them this great team, Holiday's the only one that has a ring in their locker room.
And they're not a good clutch team. This has been something for the last few years where during those games when it's close, when you need to make a big play against other good opponents, it seems like the things they do well throughout the game, when they're moving the ball and when it's free flowing, that's when some of your old habits come back, right? When you're tired late in the game, and that's when it goes 1-on-1 and Tatum gets the ball and then he goes to Brown and they don't move the ball as much. They don't get it to the open guy. They don't do as much Derek White late in the game, who is someone that's a lot of time a great matchup for them, because when you think about teams and how they have to defend Boston, a lot of time the team's fifth best defender is guarding Derek White.
Which is a great matchup, and White is having a phenomenal year that's really going underneath the radar. Someone was arguing he should be in the MVP conversation, which, I mean, let's face it, he's never going to win it, but the guy's argument about it was really compelling.
And he's great both ways too, defensively as well. He helps him guard the perimeter. So yeah, it's going to be hard to really take anything out of these next few weeks for Boston. That big game they had circled was that Denver game, and they played well in that game. But we're going to talk about Denver in a minute. They're kind of ramping things up right now coming out of the All-Star break. The Bucks had a weird week. They lose to the Lakers without LeBron. They get crushed by the Kings, but they end up picking up a couple other wins. And honestly, I think they have some holes and there are some weaknesses like every team has. Those games didn't really bother me all that much, honestly, because right now the Lakers and the Kings have a little bit more to play for on a night to night. These are teams that are trying to get into the playoffs. Milwaukee's a little more settled. So if they catch teams at home that might have a little bit more in those situations, I wasn't really shocked. And it is not the greatest matchup for them when you have kind of just look at the two games that they didn't play as well this week against the Lakers. D'Angelo went crazy. We'll talk about him in a minute. Guarding the perimeter has been a concern that you've had all along, Erik. Once they made the trade for Dame and they had to lose a little bit of their depth, you were concerned about that, being able to guard the perimeter. They brought in Pat Bev, so that helps you here and there. But, like anything, if you have someone playing at that level in a game, sometimes you're not going to be able to slow them down. We saw both Monk and Fox have incredible nights also against Milwaukee last night. So what do you think about the Bucks coming off this last week? And they're kind of still sitting in that 2 spot right there with the Cavs.
I mean, the game against the Kings was awful. I mean, that was just, we want to get out of here. We're done with this road trip. and that completely showed in that blowout loss to them. The thing that I'm really worried about them is everyone wants to do the Giannis and Dame pick and roll, which in theory works, but Giannis can't pick and pop. He's always going to be rolling to the basket. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier for the defense. That's why you need to be able to do it with Lopez, Portis, one of those type guys. Also, another big thing is if Lopez is going to be out on the perimeter and they put a small forward on him, he needs to get back
go down low
in the post and do something. He's starting to drift off a little bit to the perimeter. A little bit worried for that. But at the end of the day, Middleton's their X factor. I know everyone's joshing Dame, Beasley, Giannis. They need Middleton. They need that wing defender, someone that can make free throws at the end of the game.
And get his own shot, hit a big shot.
He's just going to be a floor spacer because he's done it before. I mean, I think we kind of forget how good Middleton was before he had all these injuries. He's a top 20 guy in the league.
You still got to respect him spacing wise too. When he's out there, you have to always give him a really good look defensively when he's at the 3-point line. So I agree with you. Like, could they still be competitive without him and everything else go well? Sure. But
I think he could lose first round. Like, if they don't have him first round, I think their
ceiling and their floor, like their range is way more without a guy like a Middleton. He just solidifies them so much more, giving them another option. You kind of point this out. It puts everybody in their perfect slots, right? Where you have Giannis as your one, you have Dame as your one ball handler, and you're like your number 2 guy. You've got Middleton as a real number 3 guy there. And that's a nice setup with those guys, the way they play on the floor, the style they play. And it will help.
And you can stagger too. I mean, you can have 2 of those guys on the court
at all times. Yep. That's just going to be key for them. For the Cavs, we look at this team and we'll have to keep an eye on what Mitchell looks like right now coming back. And then Mobley, they have to get him healthy. They've been really well coached this year because the last few weeks they've been decimated by injuries and they've been playing well and winning some games that they probably shouldn't have. But for them, they are completely the type of team that needs every single one of their players. They need everyone to be healthy, all of it to be going well, everyone to be playing at their best in order to probably win 2 series. Otherwise, I just think their ceiling is not high unless everyone and everything is going well and they get the right matchup. So again, for them, I'm not sure if they're a type of team right now over the next couple of weeks. They're obviously not concerned, or there's not a whole lot you can do about moving up and down, when you don't have your roster there. But I think for them, they're really going to be worried about getting these guys back for a few games, making sure there's rust off of them, but you got to get healthy and you have to have in particular Mitchell and Mobley because they're not going far without those guys.
No. And I mean, reality of the situation is this: they're banged up. They're only 3 up. And if the guys don't get back, how much will they be able to play? You know what I mean? Like, you really don't want to rush the guys back. They're only 3 up on the Knicks. They could drop down to that 4 line, which I think you kind of want to try to avoid Boston as much as you can. And when these guys do come back, what is their conditioning like? What is their timing like? So I'm a little worried about the Cavs. We're going to see them drop down these standings.
The types of players right now too that you have to, I think, really worry about coming back at this time of the year are the really, really high usage players, right? Like, for example, if you have a player on your team that could be helpful for you, someone that's going to be coming off the bench, maybe playing 15 or 20 minutes, you don't worry quite as much about them getting back, getting healthy. But guys like Embiid or Mitchell, if they're not able to come out and give you 10 games before the playoffs where you can actually see them, it's so hard to trust them or to put them back out there in a playoff series at that level and expect them to be able to be in rhythm, right? To be the same type of player they need to be to help these teams win a playoff series. Example, the Lakers, they're hoping to get back guys like Vanderbilt and Vincent. I think for them, if they can get them back, those guys are nice guys because all they would be is guys that you can throw out there for like 10 or 15 minutes. You're not going to be expecting them to be having the ball in their hand the whole game, making decision. They don't need to be in 40 minutes of game shape like a Joel Embiid is going to need to, like a Mitchell is going to need to. I think that's a difference too when you've got Mitchell and Mobley, your two best players, the two real keys, and there's just no way they're going to be at 100% come playoff time this year.
Not at all. No.
And we look at the team right below them, Eric, who I didn't know they were quite this good. So the Knicks, this good with Anunoby, the Knicks, who are in the 4 spot right now, they were struggling a little bit. They scored the fewest points in a game in the NBA in 3 years last week. They scored 73. I was like, I thought my TV went back to like the early 1990s, Eric. I wasn't sure what we were watching there, but Anunoby comes back. He played 29 minutes on Tuesday. They got a big win over the 76ers. He had 14 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. The stuff that he does, though, for you on the court, a lot of times it's not even in the box score. It's the defense that he plays. It's the length that he has that makes like difficult on the opposing team. So far this year, with him, the Knicks are 13-2. Without him, they're exactly 500. It's not a tiny sample size. It's not a huge one, but we're talking about 13-2 with him. And then you notice the drop off otherwise. And they're still waiting on Randall and Robinson. So you look at this team, they're a type of sneaky team where looking at the teams in the East, having a guy like Anunoby, if you match up with Boston, man, how much you can do with a guy like that where you could throw him at Brown, at Tatum, at the wings they have there. He makes so much of a difference for a team like the Knicks who just haven't had a player like that could slow down any opposing wings. If he's healthy, he's out there. And you've got Brunson, who's back. He was playing well. Hart had another triple-double. Hart's had 4 triple-doubles this year. He's such a good role player. And then you get Mitchell and Robinson back. All of a sudden, again, this team with all their pieces back, if they can get them, I like Brunson leading them. I don't think he's the type of guy who can be your number 1 and lead you all the way to a title. But all of a sudden, they start to match up. Just a guy like Anunoby helps them match up so much better with the Celtics and the Bucks. They can throw him at Giannis a little bit too, and he can at least make life difficult for him. And that's an X factor they haven't had.
Yeah, I mean, getting OG there is huge. Like you said, you need the wing defenders, and them having those type of guys is absolutely huge for what, excuse me, for what they're trying to do. Everyone talks about the minutes. I'll give Tibbs props. I mean, you kind of look, those minutes really aren't that bad right now. Randall, OG, Brunson, all around the 35-minute mark. My thing is this, though. Come playoff time, playoff basketball is so much different. Mitchell Robinson last year couldn't be on the court.
Yep.
Josh Hart couldn't be on the court. You lose Quentin Grimes, who's a great floor spacer that can shoot the 3. I mean, they're going to play.
Randall is one of those key guys for them because in the playoffs, and you see it with him, when he starts to struggle or if he's not hitting his shot and they clog the paint a little bit, he starts to get like he wears it on his face. Yeah. His good and bad games almost as much as any player in the league. And like a good Randall, when he cares a little bit on defense and then he makes difficult on defense, he gets a defensive rebound and then he goes coast to coast. That dude is good, man. He's like his A game and his ceiling is really high, but all of a sudden he starts getting frustrated. They're down a little bit. And then he feels like he's not getting the ball. He takes some bad shots. He starts forcing things. He's one of those guys you need to see him mature in the big moments. I'm going to talk about one of them for the Lakers with D'Angelo too. Guys that have had some moments here and there, good and bad, but they're the types of players you need to see them continue to progress and take the next step, or else they're just hard to trust in those moments.
Yeah, and trust is a big thing, man. You got to be able to trust. And the main thing everyone needs to remember is playoff basketball is so much different. A lot of these guys that we see getting runs just aren't going to be able to be out there for that much extended time because of how limited they are defensively and with what other teams like to do.
And how quickly you kind of forget about how You get into the playoffs, a guy who's been playing for you all year long and playing well, he has 2 bad games. All of a sudden you're down 2-0, and then you start making adjustments, right? Mm-hmm. There's not even time to let this guy go through that bad stretch because you don't have a sample size, right? If it's a bad matchup for someone and your guy's getting beat, he's not hitting his shots, and now it's game 3, you can't go down 3-0. You start this guy, instead of giving him your normal 8 or 10 minutes to start, you give him 4 or 5. He doesn't hit his shots, short leash, you pull him. He may not be going back in.
Yeah. That's the big thing. And I mean, the main thing in a playoff series that people need to remember is you don't want to be the first team to make an adjustment. You just
blink. You don't want to blink. Yep. Yeah. You got to be able to hold your feet, hold your ground, kind of counter. You can counter to what they do the next game, make some adjustments, but you don't want to be the one to completely say, uh-oh, what we are doing is not working. We have to completely change it. Because when you do, you're already, it's like you're in a fight, right? It's like they threw and landed the first punch.
Exactly.
And now you're back and you're on your heels. As we didn't have great weeks for Orlando, who lost back-to-back games. They're now in the 5 spot. And then Miami is playing right now as you and I record. They have a tough game against Denver. They're actually up late in the third quarter by a couple points. It's been going back and forth with them and the Nuggets. So Miami's all the way down to the 8th spot now because they lost 3 in a row. Orlando lost 2 in a row. So they're down to the 5 spot. And, with these teams, what's going to happen every time we talk with the week, there's going to be some movement between 4 and all the way down to 8. And, if you're Boston sitting up top, you're looking at some of these teams and you sure don't want to play Miami. And I know you as a Milwaukee fan, I just, even when they struggle getting into the playoffs, if they're healthy with the coaching that they have, that's the key. Spo is so good. He is so good at figuring you out in a playoff series. And he is so good at putting his players in position to succeed. So it'll be really fascinating to watch where Miami ends up, because I do think a little less in the East, but in the West, there are 3 or 4 different teams that could end up in the play-in that nobody's going to want to play. Nobody wants to play the Warriors and Steph Curry in a first round, or Luka or LeBron and AD. If you had a great year, you don't want that to be your first round matchup. That's tough work right off the bat. Same thing.
See those guys.
Right. Same thing for, I think, Milwaukee and for Boston. If you're up top, you figure, okay, we want to have as easy of a series as possible in the first round. You never want to pick your opponent, but you look around at teams, Atlanta, Chicago, you'd love if one of them got in. A team like Orlando or the Pacers, you'd feel like they're young. They're probably a year ahead of where they should be. They're probably a team that might not be proven in the playoffs quite yet. And then if you get Philly, and they're super banged up right now, at least they got Maxey back, Erik, recently from concussion protocol, but we don't really have any update right now on Embiid.
No, nothing at all. Excuse me. The main thing with Embiid is that they didn't start selling at the trade deadline, so that kind of leads you to think he is going to be back at some point. Because why wouldn't, you know what I mean? Why wouldn't they sell
get something? Exactly.
He's going to be back. I really think the main thing is you look at the Magic. I mean, 7-3 in their last 10, but they lost their last 2. They are right now 4 games back of the Cavs, who have some injuries, 1 game back of the Knicks, same record as the Pacers. They have the Nets back-to-back with the Raptors and the Hornets. If they win all 4, which is possible, I think it's a real big,
that's huge
possibility that they're going to be locked
into a playoff spot, like a series.
Yeah, and not have to play in. So I really think this is a critical 4-game swing for the Magic, where they can really kind of quote unquote solidify themselves making a run.
Because I feel like for the Pacers and the Magic, that has to be the goal this year, right? Get a series, get us into the series. And if we can avoid the play-in, you feel like even if we get swept 4-0, this is a big step for our franchise, for our organization. We for Orlando, they feel like they've got Paolo and Franz and a good young group to build around. For the Pacers, they feel like they found their guy with Halliburton, so we've got our franchise cornerstone right now. We took a nice step forward, and now we're going to be able to lure some other free agents here because they like these young guys. They're going to want to play with them. So that's just a huge thing for them, I think.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the Pacers. I mean, look, they have a 3-game homestand, Bulls, Nets, Cavs. They're actually losing to the Bulls right now. And then they have a road trip, and in that road trip, they have 4 games in 5 days. That is insanely hard, especially with their defensive issues, and the defensive effort will be the one that kind of dies down. The thing with the Heat, Hero's banged up, which is kind of messing around with them a little bit. They have lost 3. They have lost 3 in a row. And I'll be honest, like, I can see the Heat, 76ers win a series, Pacers, Magic. But I mean, the Bulls, and I'll be honest, the Bulls and Hawks, I kind of feel are just kind of in the dead zone right now.
Yeah.
We could see both those teams go over major turnovers.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've seen them in that same range 3 or 4 years in a row. Ever since the Hawks made their run to the Eastern Conference Finals, they have not taken one step forward. And the Bulls, they had, with this group, when they put them together, when they had Lonzo healthy, and they brought in, and they had DeRozan and Levine and Vucevic, and they brought in Caruso, there was a little stretch where they had something there because Lonzo at the top of his game gave you like a really nice kind of like point guard on both sides. You had some good perimeter defense there with him and Caruso both. They were able to get some scoring, but they haven't been healthy. Their pieces haven't been together. They're just always in this range. And you pointed it out a few weeks ago. This is like the worst spot you can be in, where you're
you're literally in the dead zone. And I mean,
purgatory. You're just above or just below 500. You're not so bad that you're ever getting top picks. You still have good enough players to where you don't feel like you want to just completely, blow it all up, but that's what you really should do. And both of these teams are in that range where they're going to have to make some big decisions soon. And we keep hearing about Trae Young as, moving to different places. And as a Laker fan, I really don't want Trae Young. I don't want to be paying someone like that much money who's a one-way player. And I need to see a little bit more from. So here's a look at the East. Let's bounce on over, Eric, talk about the West, as things are real interesting up top in the West right now. You have OKC and Denver tied for first. OKC has the tiebreaker over the Nuggets, but the Nuggets have now won 3 in a row. They've won 9 out of 10 coming out of the All-Star break. And it does look like it's a 3-team battle at the moment for the number 1 spot out West. So I kind of wonder with these 3 teams, you've got OKC, super young, Minnesota. You think of them as a young team because you've got Ant there and he's sort of their young superstar who leads them, but they do have some veteran leadership on their team, like Conley and Gobert and even Towns, guys who have been around for a little while. Towns is now hurt though, Eric, so he's going to be out for basically the rest of the season. They're saying probably the early playoffs he can come back. He had a meniscus surgery, so they're thinking it's a 4 to 6 week return likely. Gobert left the game for Minnesota last night holding his chest. They do have a huge comeback win against the Clippers. And we'll talk about Kawhi in a minute. But if you're looking at these 3 up top in the way that you have 2 teams who are more the younger teams that we didn't really expect Oklahoma City and Minnesota to be battling for the number 1 spot. We probably expected them to be playoff teams, but maybe a little farther down. Denver, they're your returning champs, but do they care about getting the number 1 seed? Does it really matter to them? And then on the flip side, they're a very good home team. For them, is it important knowing, hey, we get this advantage at home? People probably even get a little psyched out coming to the elevation in Denver. So let's make sure we play well. Or do they say, hey, we need Murray, we need Porter Jr., we need to make sure that KCP, who's been banged up, these guys, we're going to sit them here and there and just make sure that we're ready because we're not worried about if we have to go on the road.
I mean, I really think the big thing that we need to remember, and you hit the nail on the head, Denver does this thing where you're X miles above sea level, so that way everybody knows it. They blare it during the opponent's
announce right the intro.
Their intros saying that this could be hazardous for your health. So I mean, they clearly kind of get into what's going on. I really think the key thing with the Thunder is when we look at their schedule, they got 19 remaining games. 11 of them are against playoff teams. So I think we can see them kind of come back down to that 2-line. Denver 9-1 in their last season. When I was looking at them, the thing that kind of stood out to me is Michael Porter's been playing great, shooting the ball, but his rebounding hasn't been good. His rebounding numbers are a little bit down. Was a great rebounder in the playoffs. They need him to be able to stick it. Not counting tonight, do you know how many free throws he's taken this month?
20, 22.
One.
Porter Jr.?
Porter Jr.
So he's just becoming that spot up three guy, really.
Shooter, so he's not really getting the ball to the rim. And
which could hurt them come playoff time, right? When you need a little more from him, you don't want to necessarily have him as like a really overqualified spot up shooter.
Yep, he needs to be that third guy going to the rim. Really question their depth. And then in terms of the Wolves, sneaky. They have a phenomenal schedule. They have 18 games remaining. Only 7 of the 18 are a team battling for a playoff position. So even though they don't have Towns, just because of who they're playing against, this could be a team that they quote unquote kind of hold their line. I don't think they drop down below the 3 line.
As long as Gobert's healthy enough for them down the stretch to play a little, they still have Naz Reid as another big who's super capable.
I love Naz Reid. I think
he's fantastic offensively, right? He's not great defensively, but I think he gets a little bit. He talked about like he's worse than he is. He's just not a great rebounder because he's out at the perimeter a lot of the time. So that's what ends up happening because he's such a good shooter. You have him at the 3-point line because it's such a high percentage shot. So he's not around to get as many rebounds. But if you have him with another big, then you're really. That Gobert and him are a perfect fit with each other because Gobert does all those things that Naz doesn't do. And then I've been so impressed with the guys like Alexander Walker. You have, guys like Kyle Anderson who step up a little bit. You have McDaniels who they absolutely love. And then you get a guy like Conley who, when you sort of forget he's out there, because there are a lot of stretches of the game where Ant will have the ball in his hand for a little while. And then you kind of forget about Conley, who all of a sudden pops up and hits 5 or 6 threes last night against the Clippers. And they're deeper than I think they get credit for. And I've been really impressed with them. And when you watch them in a game like last night, Tuesday night, they played against the Clippers. They were down by 22 early in the game. And then Kawhi gets hurt. We're going to talk about him in a second. It was bizarre. And all of a sudden you see Ant get in that mode where he just wants to carry things. And honestly, Eric, I mean, Jokic is Jokic. I think he's on a different level than everybody right now and is going to go down as just all time what he does offensively. But taking him out of the equation, I don't know many people in the league right now that when they get cooking for 5 minutes straight, every single possession, they can dominate the ball. They can go inside, outside. They can post you up. They can jump over your head and slam it right in your face. And then what Ant does too, he doesn't do it every single possession during the regular season, but when he locks in defensively, when it's an important game or an important stretch, honestly, I really do think his ceiling right now is about the highest of anyone in the league when he has those little 5-minute stretches. And he had one of them last night. He ends up with 37 points. You see him making huge plays defensively. He's just like not even letting Paul George get shots off that he normally would get in some spots. And I'm watching him progress is awesome. Like he is progressing exactly how people hope a franchise player will. You get a guy, you could tell the rookie year that they have something, and then they take a nice step forward like he did last year. And every offseason, you can see that he's worked on his game. His handles are now better than they were before. His 3-point game is now better than it was before. And defensively, he cares more and more, and you can see him kind of taking that challenge more and more, especially I think in games right now when Towns isn't around and he feels like, okay, I have to do a little bit more. I've been so impressed with him, man. He can lead you, and I think he might be there right now and might be ready to be the best player on a title team or a team that makes it to the finals.
I mean, we've been kind of talking about it for a while, like how much we like him and how we feel that he should have been the
rookie of the year, even
the rookie of the year. I mean, giving it to freaking
LaMelo, right?
LaMelo was a joke. I mean, it was a freaking joke. I've been saying it, you've been saying it, like he should be the focal point of that offense. And finally at that point. But at the end of the day, I just, with how playoff basketball is, I don't think you can play Gobert, Towns, and Reed, 2 of the 3 at the same time.
And for long periods of time in the playoffs, they're going to have a hard time matching up defensively with other teams, right? Yeah. When other teams go smaller, that's going to make it a little bit difficult on like who's Naz Reid guarding in that situation, right? If you have Gobert guarding the paint and then you're playing against another team and they, is Naz, if they're playing the Nuggets, he's guarding, I guess, Aaron Gordon or Michael Porter Jr. against that team. That's not even that bad, but they have a foot speed against him, right? If that's the Lakers, it's Rui. Rui will take him right off the dribble every time. Mm-hmm. Someone like that. And that's sort of the problem that you're talking about there is that I think as long as their coach can use their roster and make the adjustments and not get a little bit stubborn with it feeling like, hey, Towns and Gobert, these guys have to play this amount of time. If they can just make the adjustments and say, hey, these guys are working right now, or this is working better in this series. And then, hey, the next series might not be as much of a Gobert series. That might be more of a Towns and Naz series because they're better floor stretchers.
But you need Gobert to buy into that. That's the thing.
You need all 3 of Gobert and Towns and Naz.
Or whoever it is. You know what I mean?
All of them, right? Yeah. And maybe because at this point, both Gobert and Towns are going to be a little bit banged up. Maybe you can get that from them and where they'll say, hey, look, right now, I'm not at 100%. Let's build around Ant. I'll give you 20, 25 minutes that I can. When I watched them last night without all of the bigs, mm-hmm. I like that. Like when they just have the one big, right? And they have Ant leading the way and they have a couple really nice wings. I think that's their ceiling. Like that might be what they would have to go to late in games in the playoffs, like their small kind of death lineup.
Yeah. But then again, like,
but isn't that's not an advantage for them?
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So
the Ant-Man, he's the X factor, right? He's that X factor that he carry you a little farther and do some special things. Man, he's been awesome. And we talked about the Clippers. The Clippers coming out of the All-Star break, they're 5-6, but they're 1-6 against teams that are over 500. They've only defeated bad teams. And last night, second quarter, Clippers were up by 20. Kawhi takes a shot, and you could see right after he jammed himself, and you could, and then all of a sudden his back is the rumor. And by the second quarter, I can't even recall seeing something like this unless a player needed to go to the hospital because they needed stitches or something like that. I honestly do not remember seeing players leave the arena like this in the second quarter. Now, I get it when they said him sitting on the bench would have been more uncomfortable than him going home. You can't have him sit in the locker room and have him getting worked on. At least they're with the team. That's just a thing that I've never liked about Kawhi at all. And ever since he came from the Spurs over to the Clippers, really when he went to Toronto first, there was the year that he sat out, he kind of got this like mythical, like he rose to this level because when he's really healthy and when he goes through stretches, he's honestly like as good as any player in the league. He's about the best two-way player when he's on. But the last 5 or 6 years, we haven't seen it at all for long stretches. We saw it a bunch this year, and then now for the final third of the season, he's not only hurt, but in massive games for his team. Like, what are you thinking if you're the other guys on the team? And it's like, what happened to Kawhi? Oh, he just jammed his back. He's gone. What? Where did he go? He just left the arena? That's weird. And then you got Westbrook, who had been playing pretty well for them, accepting his role, coming off the bench and being a 20-minute guy. And now Westbrook's hurt. They may not have him back for the rest of the year. I was listening to the post-game comments. Harden, you started to see it last night, Eric. The honeymoon period with Harden is over. They're asking him, about moving forward. He said, yeah, I hurt my shoulder a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play Thursday night against the Bulls. And you could just hear it. And I was like, oh, that's the Harden I know. That's the guy that we know very well. And you see Paul George, his last 19 games entering Tuesday, 43% from the field, 33% from three. He's only averaging 18 points per game. He had 5 turnovers on Tuesday night. So now all of a sudden, this team that a few weeks ago before the All-Star break, they were all the way up to the 3-2 spot, like battling for a top seed. Everybody was starting to kind of believe in this team because for a long, 50 games or so, they were playing really well. But I think you and I were kind of expecting some of these players, they're not durable players, and they've had bad attitudes, or I don't know how much these guys care about winning. I really don't. Like, as a collective group, I think they're selfish guys. Kawhi, Paul George, maybe Westbrook, Harden. I think they're a little selfish with the way they play and the things they care about with their accolades and what's important to them. They're not guys that are diving on the floor to get a loose ball. And you need to be, when you build a team, you need some guys on your team that are like that are willing to do those things. I think all these guys are a little different. And I really wouldn't be shocked if they struggle this last part down the stretch. We have no idea really what we're going to expect from Kawhi. They got a game coming up with the Pelicans, and the Pelicans are only 2 behind them for the 5th spot. Pelicans have a really easy schedule coming up. They could very easily have to have a road series in the playoffs now after thinking they were going to no doubt be hosting one. And I look around at them, and there aren't a lot of teams right now that I would pick them over in the West with how things are going for them over the last week or so.
I mean, you look at the Pelicans, the main thing you mentioned, their schedule, 20 games, five games, against teams that, are not really battling for anything. So I think their schedule does get a little bit tougher. My main thing with them is, do you trust Zion? CJ's been in the league for how long? Really doesn't have to do anything. Really hasn't won. BI, as much as I love BI, he really hasn't taken that elite step forward that everyone has expected to see by now. I love Herb Jones. I think Herb Jones is great. But
and Murphy's great. And I like so many of their pieces, Eric, but they are a team. I think what we're talking about with Minnesota, in that I got to see it in a series with them when things slow down, and what it's going to be like with Zion out there and him. Can he play legitimate defense or get attacked by other people's bests, right? We're kind of like what we were just talking about with a player like Naz Reid. Can you have Zion and Big V out there? If not, if you're going Zion and Nance, is that enough for, at the perimeter? Is that enough in the paint to stop guys from driving the lane? And then they're I like 7, 8, 9 of their guys, but I'm concerned about how it all works together in a playoff series when they match up, because they're a team just sort of like the Clippers in that I look at the Pelicans where they had a good regular season so far, and the advanced metrics really like them. They have the number 1 defense since the All-Star break. They're one of 4 teams that's in the top 10 in offense and defensive efficiency, and they get to play a banged-up Clippers team coming up this week that should help them. But they're only 6-6 against the top 4, and when I go through each team, I wouldn't pick them in a series against OKC. I wouldn't pick them in a series against Denver. I wouldn't pick them in a series against Minnesota. The Clippers, health-wise, it depends. that would be intriguing. But if the Clippers were healthier and they had Kawhi, I wouldn't pick the Pelicans. I wouldn't pick them against the Suns, probably the Kings, Mavericks, Lakers, or Warriors. So that's sort of like the problem I have with them is they've played well, and I can't take away what they've done. And even with the advanced metrics, like they have some great shooters. They have a good defender like Herb Jones. They do seem like they have a little bit of versatility. I don't know if they have a number one guy that's comparable to anybody, to your other teams, the other really good teams' number one guys, though, right?
Yeah. I mean,
because you got Zion, you got
like
BI.
I am disappointed BI is not taking that big step. Like, is he good? Yeah. But is he like, at this point, I thought he was going to be a top 10 player.
Me too. And where I've been especially disappointed with him is on the defensive side of the ball, because watching him when he was young with the Lakers and when they had some of the real young guys all playing together, there would be games where you could see he was very, very focused on playing good defense, being a good defender. And with his length, when he cares about that, he is really difficult to get by. He can recover real quickly. I mean, I'm going to give Durant some credit. He's playing fantastic defensively this year. He has to for them. And that's what worries me about the Suns when we continue to talk about them, which they're next, is that they need Durant to play at such a high level, both sides, which he's doing right now. But can he keep doing that again at 35, 36 years old for the next 15 games and then through 4 playoff series where he has to help so much defensively? He has to be a big presence there. That is what worries me about a Suns team, that they keep finding ways to win, Eric. They seem like they're always involved in a crazy game, like a game that someone's down 20 and comes all the way back, or a really tight game late. Booker did come back. They won a big game on Tuesday night, but they do have a really tough schedule to end. It's sort of like separated in, I thought, like 3 stretches. They have coming up Boston on Thursday. Then they have Charlotte on Friday, but it's a back-to-back. So not necessarily as easy as just Charlotte, because you come off of playing the Boston game. Then they play at Milwaukee on Sunday. So 3 straight games on the road. Following that, they get Philly and Atlanta, who are both banged up. They get San Antonio back-to-back. So they'll get 4 straight winnable-ish games. And then their final 10 at Denver, at Oklahoma, at New Orleans, Cleveland, Minnesota, New Orleans, Clippers, Kings, Minnesota. That's a tough 10 games that you could lose any or all of those 10 games, to end the season. So for them, they need to try to steal a couple games this weekend on the road, because they got that 4 games where they can feel, okay, we might be able to go 4-0 in this stretch. Although I will say, Wemby, his favorite player was Durant. So keep an eye on those games. He gets up sometimes for the games against the really, really good players. I wouldn't be shocked if in one of those games, Wemby keeps them competitive and keeps them close if he's in there. We kind of figured it doesn't surprise me at all where the Suns are right now. This is kind of what I thought they would be this year, a team that has some really high highs in the regular season. They're not that deep. I think the reason why they're in the 6th spot and maybe not in the 9 or 10 spot, probably guys like Grayson Allen, who have been really good this year and been just a little bit better than you would have expected. He's leading the league in 3-point percentage. You pointed out a few weeks ago when they made the trade for Royce O'Neal, he's already been a great fit for them. And then Nurkic has been healthy too. So those are 3 guys right there that you put them with the other 3 stars. And then all of a sudden, that's not a bad rotation of 6 guys. You had 3 role players who are all able to play their role well. And then you've got your 3 stars. We didn't know that the Suns would be able to do that with the way they built their team. And that still, I don't think, is going to be enough. But that's the reason why they're here right now, because some of those guys have played really well. But coming up, man, the games against that you really sort of look at for them, they've got the 2 against the Clippers, they've got the 2 against the Pelicans, and they've got 2 against Minnesota. And those 6 games right there are going to really tell where they end up, in the seeding here.
I mean, this Suns team to me, with how much they've been banged up and the big three really not playing with each other, has me a little bit worried for what they can do when stuff shortens up and it gets into a playoff spot situation. Do they have enough depth? Grayson Allen has shown he really can't do anything than play like 15 to 20 minutes in a playoff series because of his athleticism on the wing.
And that's the thing, right? They need Allen, Nurkic,
O'Neal. There's just so much stuff with them that you have to worry about.
Totally agree with the Suns, and big game against Boston coming up on Thursday. The Mavs. So as we are recording tonight, which is Tuesday, the Mavs are playing Golden State at halftime. Dallas is up by 6, and then no Curry in this game. And then the Lakers are going to play the Kings. So those are the 4 teams that are in the play-in right now. They're basically playing each other. The 7 and the 9 and the 8 and the 10 are playing. So big games for these teams all around this position that are jockeying for position. I don't think anybody's dropping out of the 10, right? I mean, Houston, we're talking about these 10 teams that are in here.
Yeah, no one's going to drop out. I mean, it's what it is right now.
Yeah, so it's just going to be who's going to be maybe from 5 to 10. We can maybe see some movement, but mainly I think we're going to see from 6 to 10. There could be some jockeying, but Luka has 7 straight triple doubles. He's going for his 8th straight triple double tonight. For the Mavs, they have 2 games coming up with Sacramento that are going to be very important for them because they're sitting right next to Sacramento. And in their next 3 games, tonight they play Golden State, then they play Oklahoma City, and then they play Denver. Tough 3 ahead. So for this Mavericks team, you and I were kind of hitting on it. With Lively, I like this squad. They have a little bit more size. Washington gives them another piece size-wise. I still don't think this is a championship team, but when you have Luka and you have a little bit more depth with Kyrie and what he's capable of doing in a series, you have a total wild card guy like a Tim Hardaway Jr. who can come in and light it up. They can beat anybody. They can lose to anybody. I just don't think they can beat you 3 series in a row or 4 series in a row. But if you told me Luka does what he does for 6 games and you're getting 25 from Kyrie and then your other role players are stepping up, there are a few of these teams in the West that they can all beat each other. I just don't know if this team is a team that can win it all. I really wouldn't be shocked to see them win any series almost against any team. Maybe not Denver. I think like anybody else wouldn't be that shocking for me, but they're not deep enough to be missing some of their bigs. They need all their pieces and Luka and Kyrie to be playing really well.
I mean, the main thing with the Mavs is Gafford on his field goal run. What is he, 28 for the last 28?
He's not missing.
He's just not missing. All of it is just tipping and dunks. Luka's been playing great, but I really think they need to work on the distribution. Kyrie's standing still a little bit too much for me from what I'm seeing. The ball's not moving that well.
And you need him to stay engaged both because it helps both sides of the floor. You want to keep him locked in. That makes him put a little bit more effort defensively. When you get a guy standing around in the corner on offense, they tend to do that a little bit on defense too. You get a little bit flat-footed. It's hard to kind of turn yourself on and then off, back and forth. So I agree with you. I think Luka's smart, and it's hard when he's playing so well to not just give him the ball every single time, but they need that they need that mixture for them to be able to beat the good teams in good games, because they went on that weird stretch where they lost 3 in a row. He was playing well, and now they've won a few games in a row. He's been playing at the same level. It's the other guys, the Gaffords. They need more from Kyrie, those other role players, where this play-in, man, could be crazy, like with the teams that are just.
I mean, it could be. And I mean, it could be. The only game that really doesn't really do anything for me is that Nugget, what is it? Heat, not Heat.
Or the Bulls Hawks, right? Yeah.
That's the game where it's just kind of like, okay, let's just kind of get through it and then move on to the next one.
But other than that, we could have some really fun ones. Last couple teams to talk about on the West as we finish up here. We have the Lakers, 36-30. They're playing on Wednesday night in a huge game against the Kings. So what has helped the Lakers recently is they caught a couple teams. They got a little lucky with some injury help, but they went 3-1 in the last week against OKC, Milwaukee, and the Wolves. So on paper, that was a tough stretch for them. And so winning 3 out of 4 was very positive. They went 4-2 on a 6-game homestand that looked like they could have lost any of those 6 games. So at this point for them, they don't care who they're playing. They just need to keep trying to stack wins up. And the game on Wednesday is huge for them if they're trying to move up and down a little bit. And what I really want to do to give credit to the Lakers is I just have to talk a little more about D'Angelo. First up, the Lakers are 9-10, or they're 9-8 against the top 10 teams in the league. So against the best teams, the Lakers are 9-8. That's the best record in the league against the top 10. Only the Kings have a 500 record against the top 10 teams. When the Lakers have played the top 6 teams, they're 7-3 in their last 10 games. So they're playing well. Recently, we've seen the Lakers beat Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Milwaukee, and Boston. So top teams on both the East and the West. The only team they really struggle with is Denver. They cannot beat Denver. They've struggled with the Kings, who they play tonight. But where they've done well too, Eric, they're good in the clutch. They're 19-8 in games within 5 points in the last 5 minutes, which is the best in the league. So you're best in the league against the good teams, and you're best in the league against in the clutch. And a lot of that has to do with LeBron. But I saw a stat that was kind of nuts the other day, and I noticed it because of the Milwaukee game. The number 1 shooter in the NBA over the last 2 seasons in clutch situations is D'Angelo Russell. He's 8 for 15 in the final minutes of games that are in the clutch situations. And he's like way ahead of percentage-wise everybody else. I think Jason Tatum is 9 for 30. And D'Angelo's 8 for 15. And I'm seeing growth from him, Eric, that I didn't know D'Angelo had. I knew he's the type of guy who is a lighted up scorer, and he can do that for you. But where I've been impressed as a fan watching him is in his leadership, his distribution, and in games that he's playing like an actual point guard. So here's some of the numbers for D'Lo recently. He's shooting 42% from 3 this year. Incredible percentage. So that's 12th in the league. When you look at the guys in front of him, only him and Beasley are shooting over 42% on 6.5 attempts or more per game. So everybody else that's up there towards the top shoots way less. So that's why they have a better percentage. D'Lo and Beasley, they let it rip, and they're still shooting a high percentage, which is crazy. So the last 26 games for D'Angelo Russell. So we're not talking 5 games. 26 games is 1/3 of a season. The Lakers are 17-9. Very important that they're winning. D'Angelo Russell, 22.5 points per game, 6.4 assists per game, only 2.2 turnovers per game. He's shooting 46% from 3 on 8.5 attempts a game. In 26 games, he would be leading the league there's only one player in the league this year averaging a higher percentage, and that's Grayson Allen, and Grayson Allen's only shooting 5 times. During this stretch, D'Angelo has had 17 assists in a game, 14 assists in a game. He has made 9 and 8 3-pointers. He's made 6 3-pointers 3 times, and he's made 5 3-pointers. So he's made at least 5 threes 8 out of 26 times. 1/3 of the games, he's making 5, 6, 8, or 9 threes. And I don't know if people have realized how good he's been playing recently, Eric, and that's why things flip for the Lakers. And I don't know if he can sustain this going into the playoffs, but if he can, and if he can play closer to this level than what we saw from him last year, well, that will make this team obviously a much more difficult out. And they're going to be in the top 10. It just matters for them Are they going to have to win one game to get in? Are they going to have to win 2 games to get in? Or do they have a good stretch to where maybe they can get to the 6th spot and already get themselves a series? But another team that you do not want to play come playoff time because they have a high ceiling. They have guys that have been there. And a player like D'Angelo, who, yep, he got benched last year, and he certainly has some bad moments, and he's not a great defensive player, but he's got this weird confidence going right now. And I think it had to do with getting benched last year and getting kind of benched again earlier this year and hearing that he was going to get traded. And there's a story that came out about him and Schroeder. And last year there was this weird dynamic because Ham kind of knew Schroeder and gave Schroeder a little bit more. And honestly, in the playoffs, Schroeder was better. He was tougher, a little bit better. But man, I just wanted to give him a lot of credit because he's taken a lot of crap over the last year. And some players go one way and they kind of curl up in a ball, and he's gone the other way. And he has done what you want to see. He's motivated himself and he's used it as fuel. Can he keep doing this, man? Because if he can, they're good, but they're not going to win any series. They're not going to beat any good teams if they don't have Vanderbilt and probably Vincent as just defensive guys they can throw at you. They just don't have those types of players right now. And if those,
I mean, they definitely need a little bit of the backcourt depth that Vincent can provide. I mean, the big question is AD finally going to get that first win against Sabonis tonight? Time against Sabonis?
This would be one of those games if we were betting like the props and stuff for the playoffs. This would be a game that I would say the Lakers didn't play since Sunday. They've got a few days off. Everybody's been telling AD how Sabonis has been punking him, and they come off of a back-to-back last night. The Kings do. If the Lakers lose this game tonight, this will be one of the more disappointing. And let's say this. You can lose a basketball game. If they were to get like beat up and if AD doesn't play well or they don't show up, I'd be very disappointed because this is a big game for them. And we want to see them be able to rise to the level. And they've done that recently against good teams, but the Kings have their number, and the Kings they don't match up very well with them because you pointed out Sabonis is good against AD, and the Lakers don't guard the perimeter very well right now. So Fox and Monk are who's defending Fox and Monk when D'Angelo and Austin Reeves are on the court?
Exactly.
There's nobody. And you hit this on the head the other day. Until someone like a Vincent can play more, or you have Vanderbilt back because he can even play defense on smalls, I need to see more Max Christie minutes. I just do. Like, against this team, you need more Max Christie out there. He can keep the guys in front of him, and he can hit some threes, Erik. So as a Laker fan, I'm hoping there's that. And then for the Warriors, we just, for them, it's fingers crossed. Steph is going to practice Friday and then probably play Saturday against the Lakers. So for them, without Steph, they're obviously a totally different team, but it looks like he hasn't had too bad of an injury and he should be able to play this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, they need Steph. If Steph's not there, they have no chance.
Man, Erik, it's a fun time. This is what the play-in was why they created it, for this reason, right? We're watching these teams at the bottom of the West, and these games are a lot more intriguing tonight when the Lakers play the Kings and the Mavs play the Warriors. And we'll be here talking about the NBA over the next few weeks. But remember, next week, we're going to flip on over. We're going to talk about the brackets, March Madness, and the brackets will be out on Sunday. I'm actually going to join Erik on his show on Tuesday night to take an early look at the brackets. And then Erik will join me. We'll talk about it probably the next day on Wednesday at some point to record, and we'll have that out there for you so you can listen while you're filling out your brackets on Wednesday night before Thursday. That Thursday, Friday, man, 2 of the best days in all of sports. We get 16 games all day long next week.
I mean, next week is a great day of basketball. Great week of basketball. It's already kind of started. We got basketball going on with all these NBA games, loaded college slate. For hoops heads like us, this is great.
Watching them during the day. I was watching my Trojans this morning at 3 o'clock Eastern time, 12 o'clock Pacific time. They get another day game tomorrow. Erik, buddy, thank you so much for your hard work as always. Good luck to you in all of your plays this week. Make sure to give Erik a follow at eToff21 Sports. You can check out Erik's podcast that'll come out this week on Friday. Also videos, all sorts of live streams that Erik's doing. So you always want to follow along with Erik on social media because he has so many different shows. He's on so many different podcasts and doing so many different things that that's probably the easiest way to stay updated with everything. Talk to you again in just a few days, buddy. Have a good one.
Sounds good, man. Talk soon.
Thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out with us here. Best of luck, and hope your NBA team has a great week. NBA.